What about the future and what's happening now in terms of how is the consulting industry changing? How big is the change?
I like the fact that you're opening by asking me crystal ball questions so that you can come back to me a year from now and tell me how wrong I was. I thought we were friends. This is something very different. We're looking at productivity gains. We're looking at how our clients innovate. We're looking at how AI is going to affect customer experience. And, much like the smartphone, there's a little bit of, in some ways, it's like a lump of clay and you have to imagine what you can make from it.
Welcome to the HKUST MBA Superconnector podcast. This episode's guest is Keith Bevans from the global consulting firm Bain Company. Keith is a partner and executive vice president at Bain, and he leads global consultant recruiting and the talent acquisition center of excellences at Bain. In today's episode, Keith and I talk about the future of consulting in the era of AI. We also talk about what MBA applicants should know about applying to Bain for summer internships or full-time positions. Keith also shares about Experience Bain, Bain's pre-MBA summer education program for incoming MBA students from selected MBA programs, including HKUST. In addition to big picture topics like how Bain is helping clients adapt to AI or what types of talent they are looking for, we also deep dive into specific questions like, what is the future of PowerPoint in consulting? Or do GMAT scores really matter in the recruiting process? Get ready for an insightful and fun conversation. Keith, great to have you on our HKUST MBA podcast. It's always good to see you and have a chance to chat. I'm looking forward to talking about consulting, Bain, and the future of talent.
HKUST MBA is certainly a lot of letters to open with, but it is great to see you. We caught up a couple months ago when I was coming through Hong Kong, and I was excited when you reached out about this opportunity. So good to see you.
Well, Keith, I was thinking this morning, we've known each other for over 20 years. And I know you've been a long time Bainey. Can you just tell us a bit about your journey at Bain and how you ended up doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, I joined Bain in 1996, or as I like to say, the late 1900s, out of a master's degree in engineering at MIT. I came to Bain because I wanted to go back to business school, and I heard that Bain would pay for it. And that was my primary motivator for consulting. But the more people I met from Bain, the more I felt like it was a good fit for me. In fact, when I got my Bain offer, I turned down my other consulting offer and didn't interview or apply to the other two primary competitors that most people apply to. I felt like the family here felt like family to me, which was great. I went back to business school in 2000. I missed the dot-com bubble crash. I left at the height of the dot-com bubble and came back when it was burst and starting to recover and missed the worst of it. I came back to Bain in 2002, was promoted to manager in 2004, partner in 2008, and had a pretty good run. I was doing a lot of performance improvement work, working on operations and process redesign, ideally in healthcare, but not exclusively. And in 2013, I took an internal role with the firm leading up global consultant recruiting and did that for about 12 years, leading up consultant, so MBA, PhD, lateral hiring, and a lot of other parts of the business around technology, recruiting system, our website, those types of things. And most recently in 2024, my wife and I took a sabbatical and traveled for 6 months, and I returned to a slightly different role. So I lead our consultant recruiting like I did before, and I also lead 8 shared service centers or centers of excellence that include things like assessments or marketing or learning and development, just focused on making sure that the entire recruiting engine, not just the consultant recruiting engine for Bain, has the support that it needs to do great results and get the best talent into the firm.
So you and I think we had started working together when you took on that consulting recruiting role, and I was doing the recruiting here in Asia. So I remember partnering with you on that. And I do want to talk through some of our lessons later on this podcast.
Sure.
In terms of the consulting industry, you've been at Bain, so you've seen the changes, the growth from the international expansion, which really happened over the last 30 practice areas, the innovation, the development of the private equity practice at Bain, which I think was a real innovation for the firm and the industry. What about the future and what's happening now in terms of how is the consulting industry changing? How big is the change? There's headlines nowadays about AI is going to disrupt and destroy and eliminate consulting. Where are you coming out on this?
I like the fact that you're opening by asking me crystal ball questions so that you can come back to me a year from now and tell me how wrong I was. Thought we were friends. Steve, And you and I are of the same vintage, roughly, at Bain. And I would say that, first, I'll answer your question, but I will put it in context. I was here before Google, and a large part of the value that I felt like I brought as an AC, aside from my phenomenal modeling skills and sparkling personality, kidding, of course, was that there was a premium on finding the information. And clients didn't have visibility into market size or the growth of their competitors or their competitors' offering. And a lot of the creativity that we relied on as ACs was to get data that no one else had. And so a year or two in, Google launched, and all of a sudden you could get everything in less than a second on your computer if you had access to the 4 modems that we had in the office at the time. So if you were one of the lucky 4 that was on the internet, you could presumably find everything really quickly. And it was going to be the end of consulting because data was now at your fingertips in an instant. Well, it turned out that wasn't true, because instead of finding a needle in a haystack, which was the job, it then became finding the right needle in a stack of needles. And the discernment was the job. But then you fast forward and companies have websites. And, we're helping clients think through, if we have a website, we're going to have to close all our stores. It's going to cannibalize our sales. And you fast forward a little bit more and it's big data. And now, you have data scientists on the team. We won't need consultants. We'll just need data engineers and so on and so forth. Every several years, there's a new technology that leads people down this path of predicting the end of consulting or a remapping of the new world order or something like that. And AI, to me, is the latest in a long series of tools, if you've been around for a while, that will transform the industry. I mean, I'm not going to deny that it's something as straightforward these days as Google really did change the industry, right? AI, to me, feels like one of the more powerful, more transformative tools that I've ever seen. It does things that were science fiction to you and I when we were growing up. And so I won't deny that. And that's going to change the way we do things. But what I would say is the core needs don't change. The fact that our clients need help figuring out the strategy. Again, AI hallucinates. AI tells you all kinds of things, but it's not thinking. It's basically very sophisticated mathematics doing pattern matching. It's a little bit more sophisticated than the autocomplete on your phone. But that's effectively what it's doing. It's just really, really good at it with a lot of data. And, at the end of the day, though, anything that it tells you to do strategically does require change management. It does require consensus building. It does require deployment globally of whatever solution, whatever path you're going down. And that's where Bain comes in, like it always has. We focus on transformations. We focus on helping clients navigate uncertainty. And maybe this gets us to parts of the answer faster, but the answer isn't the whole thing. Right? 100% right answer that nobody can implement or execute isn't very useful. And so it's transformed the industry in certain ways, but some of the fundamental pieces of value and aspects of value that we bring to the table doesn't change at all. It's been evergreen since our founding in 1973.
So your point about back in the Google time, helping companies with e-commerce, it's a natural question. And what we all see now, it's talk about consulting firms helping clients with their AI strategy.
Yes.
Or helping them with AI implementation. Can you just tell us a bit more about what type of work is Bain really doing in this space? What are the ways you're helping clients with their AI strategies and transformations?
Yeah, it varies depending on the different need. And clients are at different stages of maturity in terms of their AI thinking. I mean, none of us are 10, 20 years into it, right? This is not performance improvement where we're talking about plant optimization. This is something very different. We're looking at productivity gains. We're looking at how our clients innovate. We're looking at how AI is going to affect customer experience. And, much like the smartphone, there's a little bit of, in some ways, it's like a lump of clay and you have to imagine what you can make from it. The smartphone, when it first launched without a lot of apps, you were kind of like, this is pretty cool. I think I'll carry it around with me all the time. And next thing you know, it's got a high-powered camera and all kinds of other tools that you just never would have imagined 10, 20 years ago. And so some of the work we're doing with clients is helping them think about how AI is going to transform their industry. And if I can use the word future-proof, how do they future-proof the core aspects of value or the core parts of their business that need to last and survive in a new world? And so there's a little bit of thinking about where is AI going to disintermediate them, much like the internet did, with some of our clients back in the day where consumer products companies can set up websites and sell direct. They don't need distribution partners. They, in some cases, don't need retail. And AI and helping companies think through how AI could affect their supply chain, how it could affect their relationships with their customers, those types of things. How can they future-proof their businesses? I'll say one aspect of work. The other part is work that we've done for decades now, because I know I did it when I was a consultant, which is think about innovation and leading those types of sessions with design thinkers and with developers and getting them all in a room on an integrated case team, which is what we do. We bring integrated case teams to our clients and actually running those workshops and those brainstorming sessions and trying to imagine and get people out of their comfort zone of this is the way we always did it. What would it be if you totally like clean slate imagined a technology that you or imagine something you could do with AI and helping people think about how do you get all of those ideas and validate them and decide where to place your bets. And the other thing that I know we're doing a lot of work in is customer experience. How do you do, back in the day, Steve, when you were here, we would talk about mass customization, which it seems like it's a contradictory terms, but you can use AI to do things that you wouldn't have imagined before. Even internally, on my recruiting team, where people writing their own cases, we never would have thought to quality check everyone's case. We would give them the guidelines and hope that they would test it on their own. But maybe there's a chatbot that can run people through their case and give them feedback on terms or biases that may be inherent in the case or complexities. And those are the types of things that, 10 years ago, I never would have wanted to review everybody's case. But now I need to go back and revisit that assumption because there's a tool that changes it. We're helping clients work through all of those types of situations and trying to think through not just how can they build capabilities to win, but where the threat's going to come from and how should they prepare for that future.
Yeah, and how much of this is consultants or other employees at Bain starting to use more AI tools? It is right. I could see the need for clients for this, but right, how are AI tools changing the job for people working at Bain?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm going to keep my answers a little bit shorter so I don't bore your audience. But we invested a ton in upskilling our people over the last several years. We were the first of the consulting firms to announce a partnership with OpenAI, and we were, quietly partnering with them long before ChatGPT went public. And we invested in a bunch of partnerships, some with other, well-established universities to upskill our people. We have trainings running all the time. We've run multiple hackathons in the company to think about for different business functions. There was one for recruiting. There was a general hackathon for things to help clients implement AI and ideas that Bain could use to help Bain's operations get better. So there is a massive effort to upskill our people, and we are very interested in hiring people. We sort of internally, wink, wink, call them bilingual. They can speak business and they can speak AI. They can speak tech. It's like you need somebody who's proficient in both because that's the way of the future. And you and I, Steve, both remember clients who are like, we don't really use the internet. And it's like, well, you're probably going to want to know that. And the clients who chose not to invest there or chose not to invest in a website or an e-commerce platform, they're not here anymore. Right? And so I think that we're investing a ton to upskill our existing team and upskill all of our process, or as we like to say, modernize Bain in a new AI-enabled world. But I also think that the folks that I'm recruiting are going to use it in their day-to-day. My wife and I have two boys that are both graduated from undergrad already. And I see how they use AI the same way you and I used Google. It's just what you do, and in some ways they get a problem and they think AI first, not let me do it the way I did it. And then somebody goes, hey, did you drop an AI on top of that and see what it thought? And I think a lot of the students, especially students at a place like HKUST, they're just going to graduate where it's just part of the curriculum. It's not they're going to take an AI class. When I was in business school, Steve, I took a class on e-commerce. It was actually a standalone class. And now it's every class talks about it's embedded. And I think students graduating today will have that embedded in their curriculum and it's going to be great.
Yeah, we have separate courses on AI, but every course has got to talk about it and have examples of how the changing finance, how's it changing accounting, right?
Exactly. And I think that's going to prepare your students for the future, but it's still early. AI has tremendous potential to transform, but it hasn't transformed everything, and in some cases anything, depending on where you're looking. The idea, I hope, is that your students are figuring out, like I said, if you dump a bunch of Legos or put a lump of clay on the table, how quickly can they imagine different things to build with it? And if you dump some new Legos or a different type of clay, can they adapt and build with that? And it's that skill of building and imagining that's the skill that will translate and frankly doesn't have an expiration date.
Well, what about generating the famous consulting PowerPoint slides?
I don't know what you're talking about, Steve. You've been gone too long. We don't use PowerPoint here. Okay, I'm clearly making that up. If they could see the video and the smile we both have thinking about that. There's a couple things that are true. One, there are tools that can generate slides. There are tools that can quality check slides and tighten up taglines and titles and things like that. That's fine. What I think is more important is that as we've thought about where people are at, we've also, and I'm coming from our partner meeting, I flew back this morning, we're talking about you don't have to overslide things. And sometimes you can communicate your message better in a Word document where it's just prose and you just make your points, right? And sometimes it's better to put the slides away and just have the right questions in an email and get together and talk, or jump up and go to the whiteboard and sketch things out. And so, there is potential there, but I think the bigger question is, do you need slides to communicate what you're going to communicate? For example, I have two different teams, one in EMEA, one in the US. Stephen and Brianni are working on them, and they're creating dashboards so that our talent acquisition leaders and our customers internally can keep a real-time eye on the pipeline of candidates that are applying to all the different positions that Bain hires. And we gave our customers access to those dashboards so they can pull it up in real time whenever they want. And Steve, in the past, we would pull that data out of the system and make slides from it. And what was crazier is when we finally had the dashboards, we spent a bunch of years taking screenshots of the dashboard and pasting them onto PowerPoint slides, which is crazy.
Yes.
And so now we're just making those tools available. And so we can actually have a meeting and pull up the dashboard together and talk off of that instead of just putting it on PowerPoint slides, because that's how we all grew up doing it.
Yeah, one of the things I've been thinking about is how, with the readily available use of all the Gen AI tools, content is just easier and easier to create. And
Yes.
so pretty soon we're going to be overwhelmed with it, right? And no one's going to want to wade through 500 pages of slides.
That's
No
right.
one's going to have patience for that. So it's got to be other ways of communicating. We are going to have to get better at learning how to engage, right, with people in the right way that's going to meet them wherever they are in the most effective way, and not just kind of communicating what we think, but also finding ways to generate a dialogue, create together, right, innovate together,
That's right.
things like that.
And there is a role, Steve, I don't want to undersell it. I mean, there is a role for AI to play in that, right? But at the end of the day, until I guess they get artificial general intelligence, it's just a tool and it's an amplifier. And if you're creative, it can make you more creative. If you're super thoughtful and detail oriented, it can make you more of that. And so it's in the room as a tool to be used to push the whole team further. And that's a good thing.
Yep.
But we can't lose sight of the fact that it's not a substitute for good judgment and good thinking. It's just a math model, a very sophisticated one.
Okay. So going into this next era of AI-enabled business and work,
Mhm.
your role, thinking about the type of talent to bring into Bain, thinking about how to pick the right talent. Let's just talk about as a people business, or if it's
Mhm.
still a people business and not a tech business now, but if it's still a people business.
Very much a people business.
How have the types of talent within Bain been changing? Can you just paint the picture for us of what it looks like today and things you anticipate for the coming years?
So our core sort of AC and consultant, which is the title we use for post MBA. So a lot of your audience will be, this audience will be MBAs, which would join Bain as consultants as the title. The need for that type of talent hasn't changed. Candidly, we're in budget season right now, and our summer associate program next year is going to be significantly bigger than it was this year. And those are mostly MBAs, probably all MBAs actually. And so the appetite for the talent hasn't changed. I think what's changed is that if you're a senior manager at Bain now, you don't have just MBAs on the team and just people out of undergrad on the team, which is very familiar. Steve, you're in a program where if I tend to teach a first-year class in accounting, I kind of know what I'm getting. Some people have done a lot, some people have done a little, but they're all first years in business school, so they feel like there's a profile that you can expect every year. And when you and I were growing up managing teams at Bain, there was a profile. There was a couple of undergrads and a couple of MBAs, and that was my team of 4, and off we went. But now the team will have, potentially, depending on the project, a software developer or an innovation expert or a data scientist, and they're on the team as well. And for the first time in my journey at Bain, you have managers who didn't do the job of everyone on the team. When I was a partner, I had been a senior manager, I had been a consultant, and I'd been an AC. At some level, I knew what they were all doing because I was them.
Yep.
I was never a data scientist. I was never a front-end developer. And so for the first time, you're now in an environment where you're going to be working alongside people again, because we don't separate the teams. It's not, there's a strategy team over here, and when we're going to build that app to leave behind at our retail clients so their store associates have an app on an iPad, we don't just throw that over the wall to the development team. The developers are on the case team with us. Right? Those folks and the designers, or user experience designers, they're on the case team. And so now I'm a senior manager and I've got one MBA, one AC, I've got a developer, and I've got an innovation expert. And so the complexity there is different. But that's why I think programs like yours that are bringing in people with diverse backgrounds matters, because when I'm on a project team doing a final project for a class or doing some kind of joint paper or joint assignment, I get to see how they think and how they approach the problem. And that's actually the skill that's going to translate whether they come into consulting or they come to Bain or they go anywhere, because that's the world we're going to have to live in.
It does sound like that manager job is becoming more like a general manager leadership role, right? Versus when, blessing and a curse, when I knew everything that my associate consultant was doing and how to do the Excel models or PowerPoints, it was very easy for me to become, micromanager. And there are a lot of the
That's right.
people that used to work for me
It
would
is, it
complain
is
about that.
definitely, it is definitely a mixed blessing, but there's other things that come with it that you just have to rewire and get used to. I could also ask you to see a draft output of the model. I could ask you to pull up and show me the deck in advance. Well, if I'm building a software program, there is no interim. It doesn't work until I'm done. And so, if it's due Friday, I can't ask for a quick walkthrough on Wednesday. It's just partial code on Wednesday. And so then we have to spend a lot more time up front thinking through what we're building, because when Friday comes, if it's not what we agreed or what we thought we were getting, we've got a big problem, right? So there's a lot of things and norms that I probably took for granted that are changing as things get more complicated and the expertise required to deliver value for our clients increases. And there's still a role for general managers to play, and we still hire a lot of them, and people are not specializing super early in their career here. But there's other entirely different silos of expertise that are on the case team. And they all have to find a way to work together and respect each other's expertise, because you know what? A great pitcher, a great hitter, and great fielders can win World Series games. And that's what we need nowadays. That's the way that's the game that we're playing.
Is this changing the pyramid? Now that you've got other types of talents, right? And again, lots of talk in the industry about, is it going to become more of like a funnel, right? Just
It's probably too early to say, Steve. What I know is that we plan on a multi-year horizon. It turns out we're a strategy firm, so we're thinking about this. But again, these are just tools. Google didn't replace ACs. I started, actually, we weren't even using PowerPoint consistently. We were using freelance, right? And so the tools upgrade and the tools change, but the need for the skill set doesn't change. I still need somebody who can make sense of the output, who can make sure it's not hallucinating, who can actually build the GPT that we want to apply in the client situation. And so the underlying skill sets might be a little different. They might be a little more technical. But again, I think that's just the nature of the beast. Kids are graduating with that. There's not a computer lab in any elementary school now. Like, everybody just has an iPad. When I was in school, there was a computer lab. You had computer class once a week. Yeah. The other thing, though, Steve, more direct to what you're asking, is at the end of the day, it's a people business, and the answer is only part of it. And getting the hearts and minds of your clients to act on the recommendations and to really believe and buy in, AI can't do that. It's still people.
So what type of skills, what type of people are you looking for? How would you think about it? Yeah.
I get asked that a lot, mostly on the online forums on Reddit and places like that. And I should probably go back and watch it again, but we did go to update it and we realized, no, it's still true. There's a video on YouTube that we have called What Bain Looks For. And it's me talking about it. When we went to re-record it, we were like, actually, we should just drop a new intro on it because nothing's changed. And at this point, it's probably a decade old. So there's core characteristics of people that are sort of timeless. The passion for results, the intellectual curiosity, the reliability, the integrity, the hard work that they bring to the table, the same things that, somebody looked the other way when you and I joined. Those things are still true. The things that are added is more comfort and fluency with technology. There was a time, I think, when you could get by not really embracing technology, but that's not the world that we're in anymore. And that's not judging anyone in their skill set, but it is to say that people who can learn quickly, who can adapt to new technologies because it's just changing way too quickly, and people who are comfortable going down that learning curve, the biggest thing they need to know how to learn is how to learn and learn quickly and sort of fail fast, learn from it, and keep moving. Those are some of the skills that we're looking for, but the core skill set that the people bring to the table in terms of their personal characteristics really haven't changed.
So let's talk about the recruiting process and we'll use MBA students as the example. What are the entry points? Questions I'll hear are things like, which office should I apply to? How does it work today?
All the normal questions. And I'll speak to MBA. It's not super different for ACs, although the timing is different. And associate consultants tend to be either non-MBA master's candidates or bachelor candidates, just to make sure that the terminology crosses borders as we're having this conversation. The typical process, people tend to apply around now to business school. There's like a multiple deadlines, and then they'll hear sometime in the spring. We can talk about what we do before they get to the MBA from an education standpoint. We're not doing recruiting before they start their MBA. I think the thing that I would land first before I forget is the process starts really early, right? There's always a handful of students that reach out to us after the holidays because they want to intern that following summer in 4 months. And we're like, the process has been over for 4 months already. And so it's important that people understand you don't have to panic early, but you need to get in the flow early so you don't miss the deadlines because they're sneaky early. We have two main entry points for MBAs. One is the summer associate program, and that is a 10-week summer internship in one of our offices around the world. Internships, the size of the program for the most part is bound by our ability to provide good experiences for people. We don't want to overhire and have people just sitting around doing nothing or doing projects that really aren't a great fit for 10 weeks. And our hope is that everybody who interns with us for the summer gets a offer to return full-time at the end of the summer. And pretty much as long as I've been in my role, which is coming up on 16 years or 15 years, something like that, 2013. I guess I'm having math troubles this evening. But everybody our goal is that everybody who comes for the summer gets a full-time offer, Steve. And over my tenure, we've been averaging over 90% globally. So it is an important on-ramp for us. It's not the only one. It's not to say that if you don't intern here, or if you intern someplace else, your journey with us is done. A number of people who didn't come for the summer, for whatever reason, reapply in the fall. And again, that's early. So usually the internship ends in August. Our process starts in August for full-time. And we interview some in August, some in December, or in September, October. But again, we're done full-time hiring by the end. So if I could say that one more time, you would go through pre-MBA sort of education. You get to campus, start summer associate recruiting. We run that process, deadlines in December, interview in January, intern the following summer. And then you either get the offer to come back full-time or you can go through full-time recruiting in that August, September of your second year timeframe. And then start dates tend to be anywhere from June after you graduate to March, April the following year, depending on the office and depending on the need.
What if someone graduates from an MBA program and they go and work for 2, 3, 4 years at another company? Do you see any kind of lateral hiring at that level, or does it tend to be later on?
Actually, a lot of markets around the world. So I'm sitting here in Chicago, but outside the US, a lot of our markets, lateral hiring is very important. So a lot of our markets around the world, including in Asia Pacific, have always done lateral hiring. That part hasn't changed, and it's still a big part of our intake for the consultants. I realize we have a largely MBA audience, but the truth is when you look at the data, especially in APAC, we're hiring people laterally in most of our markets. The other thing that I would say is that even in the US, we do lateral hiring as well. In fact, my team is working on that as we speak to bring in a big intake. We've decided that a spring intake, March, April start dates is something that's really good for the business. So we hire a lot of people on that time frame as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in the past, we used to always say, come join Bain for a couple years and then go off work someplace else. Now I'm starting to see some people who go off and work someplace else.
Exactly.
Firm after a few years.
Most markets, Steve, will hire people in as first-year consultants, maybe second year, but just the way the career progression works, and people can visit our website at bain.com/careers to see it, but the way the progression works, we want to make sure that people start in a place they can be successful. And if you think that you've been out long enough and you should start as a manager or a senior manager, that's fine. But if you're not ready, that's a really tough place to start. We will promote people to senior manager when they're ready to be a senior manager. That's not time bound, but we tend to make sure that we're starting people at a place where we think they can succeed from day one, not where they're going to be behind and then just constantly chasing the rabbit around the track. So you said 3 or 4 years post MBA. I think a lot of the people who are coming in laterally are probably 1 or 2 years. I think officially, we're looking at, I forget, I can look it up on the website, but I think it's, 1 to 4 years or something like that.
Back to the MBA recruiting. So whether for the summer associate or right after an MBA, how should candidates think about applying to offices or practice areas? Is there any?
So there are a couple of practice areas that you can specialize in earlier in your career. Performance improvement and enterprise technology are the two that, if that's what you want to do, you can actually specialize in that from day one. In some markets, you might be able to focus on our private equity ring fence from day one, especially if you're a lateral hire with that type of experience. So you don't pick a major. I know some schools, like for undergrad, you apply to a specific department. You don't really do that at Bain. The programs of people that come in and specialize from day one are actually quite small in the grand scheme of things. So you would join Bain because you want to actually see a bunch of different things, which is what we believe is going to make you a successful general manager. And that's not for everybody, but neither are we, which is fine. That's okay. That's also, Steve, why we run so much of what I called our pre-MBA education programs, because we want people to understand what our value proposition is. Because if we're not a great fit, I want them to show up at HKUST focused on the things that are a great fit, not still exploring, right? If they can rule us in or rule us out before they get there, they can really maximize what your career office has to offer. Offices, for Bain, we tend not to specialize by office. In certain markets, especially in APAC, some in EMEA where there's different languages, you tend to do all the industries in that market. So you're almost more of a market specialist than an industry specialist, right? But we tend not to specialize as like a rule in all of our firms, in all of our offices, excuse me. So you can see pretty much any industry in any office. The biggest difference is for me, again, recognizing some of our APAC offices are big, some of them are new, some of them are relatively small. The biggest difference between the offices tends to be the size of the office, just like picking a business school. And I like to say, where do you want to wake up on Saturday? Like where do you want to, if you like 4 seasons of the year, there's some offices in APAC that you probably shouldn't go to because you're never going to see snow, right? You're never going to see the leaves turn in the fall. And that's fine. But that tends to be, to me, a bigger driver of how you should choose your office than I want office just because that's not really a thing here the way it is at some other firms.
Yeah. Okay. On the application side, so I know when we were both doing recruiting together, and I was looking at this, one topic we discussed was around GMAT score or
Yes.
GRE points in the selection process. And there's a lot of stuff out on the internet about that. And
Yeah.
I've had some people tell me things like they've already gotten into an MBA program and they'll say, I need to take the GMAT again because that's going to help me with job applications. 15 years in the role. How are you thinking about that now? What's the guidance?
I think the GMAT is a really great predictor of how well you can do on the GMAT and nothing else.
Say that again.
In other words, the associate consultant in me from 30 years ago, actually maybe 7 or 8 years ago, took the data over 10 years of people that we hired and got their GMAT scores and looked at their promotion to senior manager rates. And there was no correlation. You could torture the data as much as you wanted, and there was no correlation between your GMAT score and your ability to succeed and get promoted to senior manager at Bain. There just wasn't. And the people would look at it and say, yeah, but the higher the better, right? I was like, you can think that, but that's not what the data says. Now, the truth is, though, Steve, that you all do the work for us in a lot of cases because we're recruiting at the top schools like HKUST, and you're not letting people in with low GMATs. So everybody who is in the pool usually has a good GMAT. And it turns out that if they don't have a great GMAT score in your school, it's because they did something else that was phenomenal. And it turns out that same phenomenal thing, I wanted Bain too, which is probably why the GMAT score didn't correlate. Because if they had a lower GMAT, but they did something phenomenal in the military or they did something phenomenal in a research lab they were in, it turns out they're phenomenal despite their GMAT score, and I want them too. And so we tend not to emphasize the GMAT. If the people have it, they can submit the score, but it's not something that we look at seriously. What we did add recently, relatively recently, not within the last couple of months, are 2 digital assessments. Depending on the office you're applying to, you'll take one of 2 digital assessments. There's no prep required, but we believe that they provide a meaningful data point. It's not a cutoff, it's not a knockout, but it's a meaningful data point to somebody's overall candidacy. And so those 2 assessments might feel a little bit like the GMAT in terms of being a standardized test that you take online, but we feel like they're a better predictor, or we can sort of adjust the modules in the test to make sure that it's testing for the skills that we want.
And how about once someone's into the interview process? Is it still like case interviews? Are there any changes in what to expect?
It hasn't changed in a while. So there's, depending on the office and the role specifically, there's usually 2 cases and an experience interview. Depending on the process, there might be 2 rounds of interviews, and that might be 3 or 4 cases and an experience interview. So that's roughly what we're talking about. And the cases, anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes. I think we schedule 40, but we want to make sure you have time to sit down and get your heart rate down and all that good stuff.
Mm.
And the cases tend to be based on work that we actually worked on, which is really great. And the experience interview, I think we added an experience interview guide to our website. That's not a chance for you to give me your rehearsed script. We're not doing theater. Sometimes I ask people, hey, how's your day? And they go into like a 5-minute monologue on their entire story growing up. And I'm like, that's okay. That's not what I was going. The experience interview is just getting to know you a little bit better and thinking about why Bain, in my context, more broadly, why any role, because I think it's true of any firm that does this. Why is this the next logical step in your journey? And what are the strengths that you're going to bring to the table, and how have you demonstrated those over the past? It's a chance for me to get a little bit more color than just what the resume says. And that's the experience interview. It's not a chance for you to sort of sell me on yourself. It should be having a conversation.
Great. You mentioned the pre-education program. I am grateful that you were on the Experience Bain list of business schools. And that's something that some of our students have joined in the past. For someone who's applying to business schools, and can you just tell us a bit about what to expect in that intro?
So Experience Bain has grown a lot over the years. We're really proud of Katie and Brooke and the entire marketing team that puts that event together. It's our flagship pre-MBA program for incoming first-year MBA students. The application's open in the spring, and it's basically a series of events that run in the summer before business school. There's panel discussions on different topics. So I'm sure AI is going to be at least one, if not several of them this summer. But we'll talk about work we're doing in healthcare. We'll talk about social impact work. We'll talk about how people are balancing their work with passions that they might have outside them. I know a couple of years ago, I think we did a panel with significant others. There were no Bain people on the panel. It was just significant others because coming into it, a lot of people are curious, like, your spouse wants to recruit for business school and you might take that for recruiting. You might take it personally thinking, well, they don't want to spend any time with me when they graduate. It's like, no, that's not, you can be happily married and be a consultant as well. And we heard that one summer, we decided to tap some people's spouses in and invite spouses to the call and say, ask them whatever you want to ask them. And so it's a chance for people to really get their questions answered in a way that hopefully allows them to focus on the right career path for them when they get to school. So we try and give them a lot of exposure to our team, junior people, senior people, different industries, different capabilities, different aspects of the job, so that when they get to your campus and engage with your career office, they're further along in their journey than starting from scratch.
Great. And you mentioned the outside interests. One of the things I've always appreciated about you, Keith, is all the things you do outside of work. What are some of the things that you enjoy? Where would we find you when you're not in the office?
Where would you find me? So there's a couple things. I mentioned that I took the sabbatical. My wife and I do like to travel. You and I had breakfast earlier this year, I think, when we were passing through Hong Kong. And I say, hey, are you around like Tuesday morning before my flight? I travel a lot. I'm a serious hobbyist photographer, although it's probably a little bit more than a hobby after as long as I've been doing it with, all the different subjects and topics that I shoot. So I'm pretty serious about photography. I don't do landscapes or buildings. I do a lot of hip hop photography, which is what brings me over to Da Nang every year in different parts of Asia. It's a great community over there, and different arts and portrait work. And then I kept my sabbatical project going. So I did a project called My Home is Special. You can find the whole hub for the project at myhomeisspecial.com. And the part, because I learned how to code a website and edit my own podcast. And the podcast is My Home is Special, and it's on all major platforms. And it's taken on a life that I've decided to keep going, even though I'm back for over a year now. I've kept the project going, and a new episode out Monday, actually.
All right. So we both have podcasts going now. I guess this counts as a collab or something like that.
It's a collab. Yeah. I do the Bain one called Beyond the Bio. I do encourage people to listen to that because it is tricky, Steve, to get just the flavor. Everybody's on their best behavior when they're on at recruiting events or on a call like this, but the podcast gives you a chance to really get to know people's backgrounds. We spend about 30 minutes, 15 minutes on their background and their career journey and the important parts of their life journey, and then 15 minutes talking about wherever their focus is at Bain. And so we're closing in on 100 episodes. One just came out this week. And we've been doing it for over 5 years now. And it's a great way to get a good cross-section of the firm. We have people from all aspects of the firm on the podcast. And then I have my personal podcast, which has been a fun one.
All right. Well, that's something that, we're also trying to do here with our podcast, and give people that chance to listen to people, part of the program or related to the program, friends of the program, all of that. Keith, really Great to have you on the show, and looking forward to seeing you next time you're passing through Hong Kong.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this, Steve. It's one thing to sit and watch me flip through PowerPoint slides on Zoom. It's another thing to just pop in and listen to the people that you're bringing on the podcast while they're out for a walk or driving someplace and things like that. So I think this is a great delivery mechanism for information that your students need, and I appreciate you taking the lead on it and thinking to invite me on. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Keith Bevans. To be the first to know about our next HKUST MBA Superconnector episode, please follow this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. To learn more about HKUST's MBA program, you can check us out on our website or follow us on social media. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, WeChat, and Rednote.